This is an urban mech that I painted when I first started the channel. And while it is old, I definitely think that the paint scheme still holds up, and I'm quite happy with it. But between now and then, I've collected a whole host of more urban mechs, and I'd love to paint them up in today's video with you. Now, the urban mech is not often regarded for its looks or its combat effectiveness, but by God, is it basically the mascot of the Battletech universe. Everyone loves the little trash can that could, and I am no exception. But despite having subpar performance on the battlefield for the most part, I definitely think that this little guy has his upsides. But if you want to hear more about that, I will be releasing a video soon on my thoughts as well as the lore and history of this little guy. So, if you're interested, maybe consider tossing me a like and subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated, and then you'll know when it releases. Anyway, for today, it's just going to be a quick video where I go over the paint scheme of these little urban mechs here. The urban mech lamb you see before you, I will be doing something special with, so make sure to stay tuned till the end of the video. Anyway, thank you all so much for stopping by, and let's get on to the painting. I start the process in a classic manner by affixing my urbies to a stick and then marching them off to go get primed, ash gray in the backyard. With the models nice and primed, I use a kind of old, clumpy, and shitty off-white color to do a nice overbrush and introduce some highlights. Despite the age of this paint, it still works out alright for this role. The paint scheme idea I had for the original green urban mech was to be a planetary militia, kind of run down and Frankenstein together from the parts of several different mechs type of look. And I'm going to try to replicate this on the 3D printed mechs I have here, the Mechwarrior 5 style urban mechs. But for this, I don't remember the exact paints I used, so I'm just going to start out with an olive drab and see how we go from there. With the green going on quite nicely, you may notice that there is one urban mech left unpainted, and for this one I wanted to do something a little special. I'm going to paint this one a NATO black, and then I'm going to dry brush some blue over it, because my idea is to have an urban mech that's like a cop car. And for anyone who's played Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries and got the UM-K9, you'll know exactly what I'm referring to. That police urbie in Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries is literally like one of my favorite mechs of the game. It is so fun. With the base coats nice and applied, it is time to move on to one of the most important parts of painting a miniature, and that is having a good base gradient. So for the planetary defense urban mechs, I'm going to introduce a dry brush of a lighter green to give some color grading and some light effects. As for the police urban mech, I'm going to do something similar except with a dark blue. While I am drawing a lot of inspiration from the K9 of Mechwarrior 5, the paint scheme I'm going for is more similar to the Crown Vics of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, specifically the CVPIs, which stands for Crown Victoria Police Interceptor, which is extra funny because the urban mech, with its brisk top speed of 32.4 kilometers per hour, frankly, isn't intercepting shit. Although I guess cannon rounds are a lot faster, so With the mechs nice and dry brushed, it is time to add a little bit more definition and shadows to the planetary defense militia. For this, I'm just using a dark wash and sloppily slapping it everywhere before wiping it off with a damp paper towel. Now that our interceptor is nice and primed, it is time to get on with some of the white accents. Because he doesn't have any wing doors, I decided to just pick out some bits on the arm as well as the front pelvis and a couple of other random panels. One of the many nice things about the official Catalyst Games Lab minis is that they have very defined panel lines, unlike the Mechwarrior 5 3D prints that I have. To actually get some texture on the white, I'm going to use a gray first and then stipple on the brighter color. That way it actually looks a little bit more weathered and less new, as I don't want any of these urbies to look like they're fresh off the factory line. Upon a rewatch, I realized that some of my footage is at like 3 frames per second for some reason. I don't know, OBS just hates me. I'm still working out all the kinks with my camera setup, so please bear with me if some of these are a bit crusty. Now that the base colors are nice and blocked in, it is time to add some of the tertiary colors. Starting off, I paint some lead belcher onto the gun, the heat sinks, and anything else, and then I use a nice brown paint to block in some mud/rust on the lower legs, and having it lessen in severity and volume as it reaches the lower torso. In order to also sell this mud and grunginess, I decided to give it a coat of Agrax Earthshade. Now this really helped bring down the overall clean aesthetic of this mech, and in the end I find it really nice. It also helps to give the idea that this thing has been running off country, romping around in the bush, which I think makes sense if it's some kind of highway interceptor. This actually gave me a really fun idea to make a plague of locusts that's like some sort of 31st century rum runners on this small planet that have tanks full of moonshine in place of weapons, and then playing a game where I have to run these locusts past this highway interceptor as this poor urban mech struggles to shoot down all these incoming outlaws and bandits. I don't know, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see something like that. The final step for Constable Rash T. Can is to give him some little extra details. Starting off, I do a yellow stripe and a yellow badge on the front of his hull, and then to give him some actual police lights, I use some transparent red and blue respectively and highlight some of the panels on top, finishing it off with a little dot of white to sell some glossy texture. With our highway interceptor all but finished, it is time to busy ourselves with the urbanmech lamb. Now, this lamb is already painted green, but I really wanted it to be silver, so I'm using some Tamiya flat aluminum and just spraying it over and hoping it goes well. I haven't sprayed silver in a very long time, but what I remember is that you're supposed to put it over a base coat of black, but unfortunately I had run out of black primer and I was dangerously low on NATO black, so I just decided to wing it and put it straight over the green. And while the texture was a little bit silly and grainy, it wasn't that bad, and once I put on a black wash it looked good. For those unaware, the urbanmech Lamb, or Land Air Mech, is a Star League design that allows a battle mech to go from, well, battle mech form to aerospace fighter form. This was essentially the product of having a humongous defense budget and the Star League not knowing what to spend their money on. But anyway, despite the horrendous inefficiencies of this design, they did manage to get a couple prototypes working, as you can see by the urbanmech before you. Now, why they chose the urbanmech, I'm pretty sure is just a meme on Catalyst Games' part. Anyway, the paint scheme I decided to go for is a Canadian Forces Cold War saber with red and black accents on a silver body. Now that the mech is done, it is time to paint up the cockpit. I am once again going for a polarized jet fighter type of cockpit, and I found that using some speed paint Zealot Yellow right over the silver is a really great way to achieve that mirror look. But despite how good it looked just with one coat, I decided to also add some highlights with a chunky white. Now, because I like making my life harder, I decided to paint on a unit number to the urbanmech's wings. The number I chose was 136, which is actually the number of subscribers I had at the time of painting this. I think it's just a fun way to enshrine this channel's growth onto one of my minis. Since I'm already in the trash can naming business, with the police one being named Constable Rash T. Can, I think I'm going to be extra corny and name this one Major Tom. So, applying a coat of Zealot Yellow, I'm then going to mix up an orange from my yellow and red. I'm then going to apply this around the middle and then try to create a gradient from whitest hot at the top, a fiery orange in the middle, and then a dark smoky plume at the bottom. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I think that's pretty good, and I'm quite happy with that. Anyway, now that the lambs are completed, it is time to move on to the general rank and file urbanmechs. To add a bit of visual interest, I decided to pick out a couple of the panels and paint them slightly different shades of green. This is to imply that panels have been replaced from different urbanmechs. Because I want this military to be old, run down, and kind of shitty, I decided to make one of the R60Ls, the AC-20 wielding urbanmechs, really rusty and shitty. So I'm starting off with just a coat of a darker brown paint, and then I'm going to use a sponge to apply a lighter rust tone, and then finally I cover it all with a rust wash to really sell that grime. One of my favorite parts of Battletech has always been how the battle mechs are so rugged they can last centuries of constant abuse, misrepair, and warfare. Something about it always makes me laugh as I just imagine you're a brand new Mechwarrior joining some force and you're assigned a battle mech and it's like, hello, welcome to the military, here's your assigned mech. It is a 700-year-old piece of equipment that has fought in pretty much every major conflict since now and then. Treat her well. It's like this modern military aesthetic blended with this almost reverence for these ancient machines. It really works for me. It's delightfully absurd. Oh no, this poor urban mech suffered a catastrophic ammo explosion, which necessitated the replacement of half of the mech with factory new parts as well as the leg off of an industrial mech. Now, why they didn't just spend this money on getting a brand new urban mech? Well, quite frankly, they're not allowed to. But they're allowed to spend as much as they want on repairs per year, so, you know, bureaucracy. I decided to keep the other two urbies pretty stock, so now I'm just going around and painting all the weapon systems a nice metallic color. I then used the same transparent red that I used on the constable's police lights to get every single little bit of cockpit glass on these urban mechs, which are annoyingly small. I also used them on the laser ports. After I finally got some bases printed off, I primed them ash gray and then used a brown craft paint to give them a base coat. The urban mech you see before you is armed with an Arrow 4 artillery piece, which, for those who don't know, is one of the largest and most expensive pieces of rocket artillery in the Battletech universe. Weighing in at over 15 tons, this piece of artillery is over half the weight of the mech, which requires replacing the normal chassis with endo steel and making the cockpit ever so smaller, sacrificing the pilot's comfort for extra firepower. The Arrow 4 artillery can carry a large variety of different ammo types, ranging from the standard dumbfire explosives with a 45-meter blast radius, Jesus, to guided missiles, which can be assisted using the target acquisition gear, or TAG, which will minimize collateral damage, all the way up to the Davy Crockett-M, which is the same nuclear weapon used in the Long Tom. Despite being on an urban mech, the urban mech Arrow 4 is still an effective fire support unit, which still begs the question on why this little planetary militia got their hands on one of the most expensive, rare, and coveted pieces of artillery in the Battletech universe. But despite all that, imagine being a pirate dropping down on the planet and getting absolutely obliterated by the nuclear-armed can of beans. I mean, what do you do against that? What is your play? There is no play. You know what you do? You die screaming. Now that the urban mechs are fully painted, I pull out my standard issue jar of rocks. I'm going to be trying to make these bases more like an arid grassland instead of a full desert, so that means I'm going to have to renovate the first urban mech there. So I'm just going to attach some of these rocks to the bases, and then I'm going to attach some railroad ballast, paint that ballast, and then glue on a little bit of flock. It's not perfectly to scale, but to be honest, finding sand at Battletech scale is going to be downright impossible, so I'm just going to forego that, and it'll look good enough. Sorry for kind of glossing over the whole basing section. The footage I had was exceptionally ass. While not necessarily being powerhouses on their own, in a group, these urban mechs will withstand any invasion that comes their way. Through autocannon, nuclear-tipped Arrow 4, and especially small laser, any invasion will come to a grinding halt at these trash cans' feet.